I think I was very naive when I started my career in government, and I've been lucky enough to have worked in a number of different different roles. So I've been a civil servant. I've also worked in regional government for the Mayor of London. I've been a school governor. I've been an elected councillor. So I've seen government and public services through a number of different lenses. My sense is I was always very ambitious for government, and I am what one of my friends would call a statist. I'm a believer in the power and the importance of the state to deliver outcomes. But I think what has disappointed me is probably the the level of the cultural challenge across our public services. And this is, I think, where there's a juxtaposition between technology and culture. And I often say to my clients, again, they get excited about technology, and I say to them, well, let's park the potential of tech, and the latest trend is obviously AI. Let's park that for a minute and let's think about actually what are the changes that you need to make to your organization before you're ready for AI or other technology. And actually the biggest challenge is often cultural. We do have some very significant challenges of what you might label as inefficiency across our public services, and that creates very significant levels of challenge. For example, paper-based processes. We've just been talking about the NHS. It's the same in other public services, local authorities, for example. But we also have very, very significant levels of challenge, going back to the challenges that our aging population poses. Some of your listeners may have heard about the challenges that local government in the UK is facing. We've had waves of councils going out of business, and that's why the government at the moment are driving a wave of local government reorganisation from out of the centre, largely with an aim to consolidate councils into, like to write. I recently wrote a piece for Progressive Britain. They're a sort of think tank and membership organisation on what I call the fifth industrial revolution. We're in a time where we have this new technology coming to the fore, and it's actually not just AI. I talk about convergent technology, so it's AI, it's robotics, it's big data, it's all of those things together. I think one of the risks is if we don't take a human-centric focus, that we will end up in quite a dark place with very significant levels of job displacement. Let's move away from public services for a minute, but if you look at the creative industries, for example, there's some huge leaps and bounds being taken in production of film and TV, as an
And music as
example.
well.
Yeah, and music. So, I think creative industries could, in 2 or 3 years' time, very, very dramatically impacted by AI. I think in public services, the interesting challenge is there's an opportunity to catch up, to sort of regain to levels of productivity that we've lost. But then, yes, after that, I think we may start to see some job displacement. My understanding is more or less that the sort of more skilled, more experienced you need to be to do a job, the longer it will take to displace. So I think if you're a doctor or a surgeon, you're safer than someone who is, for example, a healthcare assistant. I know some of your listeners are from the GCC, and I've spent a little bit of time working in Saudi and the UAE, and I'm a huge admirer of the approach that a lot of the GCC have taken to technology. They have the luxury, I'd call it a luxury, because of a different governance model, of being able to take a long-term view. We could separately debate the merits of one model versus another, but there's an ambition, there's a long-term view, and there's an optimism around technology. And for example, the government of the UAE, one of the first steps that they've taken has been to create and start to roll out this huge program of training and expertise building for their senior government leaders. Now, that to me feels like a very strong, logical and way to sort of start off with bringing these technology into your government and starting with creating capability. We don't really refer to ourselves as an AI platform. It's a computational algorithm, so it's similar to, but not the same as AI. But we know that there's a growing problem with with renal disease. It's a global problem. So the leading causes of end-stage renal disease are type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular heart disease, and those conditions, or the numbers of people with those conditions are rising. Yeah, I mean, to give you some numbers, I think at the moment the NHS spends something like 10, 12 billion a year on type 2 diabetes. I think by 2035, that's going to be 20 billion. So it's going to double. And then a significant proportion of those people will go on to develop end stage renal disease. And we just won't have the dialysis capacity to be able to support all of those people. So transplantation is one of the answers. What we do at Kepsoft is we match people who need a transplant with people who are prepared to give one. It's what most people might consider altruistic donation. We tend not to use that word. We call it non-directed donation. But, essentially we are taking people who are prepared to give a kidney and matching them with people who need one. And yeah, I mean, there's a prototype version of the software is already in use with NHS Blood and Transplant in the UK. And yeah, the UK has one of the, I think, the world's largest living donor scheme. And then we're also very soon going to be deploying into a number of countries in Europe as well. So I'm increasingly of the view that the role of leadership has changed quite dramatically, and this is one of the big debates that I'm trying to provoke in government circles at the moment, is that in most countries we are, to one extent or another, fairly centralised from a governance perspective. The UK particularly so. And the challenge that brings is that we try and drive outcomes, impacts from the centre of government. And my view would be that actually we need to be pushing delivery out much, much closer to the front line. In the UK, we've always tried to drive from the centre. So famously, I had the Prime Minister's Delivery Unit set up by Sir Michael Barber, which at the time claimed some fairly significant results. But if you look at the sort of long-term impacts of what they achieved, didn't really move the dial on a lot of things. It achieved some short-term results, like better exam results. But did it actually shift the dial on people's employment prospects? No. I mean, we have 1 million NEETs in the UK at the moment, not in education, employment, or training. That's the greatest number it's ever been. So my view, and I think politicians and senior civil servants are instinctively of the view, I need to grab everything, own it, run it, drive it from the centre. I think that's impossible to do in the complex world that we now exist in. Actually, the role of the centre of government should be to create the conditions for success, set the impact, the outcome that is desired, but then push the role of actual delivery as close to the problem as possible.